Welcome, everybody. This is Business on the Block, episode 66, the Podcast Wars. Today, we're going to talk about from the world of podcasting to the future of money. Joe Rogan in the news. He renews his deal with Spotify, but it has a surprising twist. We'll dig into that. And then we'll switch gears and head into the cryptoverse to see why digital assets may finally be on the path to mass adoption. And then, of course, we'll get the update from across the pond from our reporter on the scene there, Michelle, as to why the UK government is making waves with new AI regulation. This is Business on the Block. This weekly podcast comes to you live. Our goal here is to help you understand the digital media revolution, how it's changing the world of business, and how you can profit from this. This is what we like to think of as the state of entertainment in the age of blockchain. So I'm going to introduce our co-hosts, my lovely Michelle Peterson-Clark.
Hi, everyone.
And Mike Neubauer.
Good morning.
And I am Marc Angelos. We're going to dig into story number one. This comes to us courtesy of The Verge. Rogan renews deal with Spotify. Who doesn't know this, but Joe Rogan has renewed his deal with Spotify. It is a multi-year deal rumored to be $250 million. For reference, he was $100 million when he got signed with them. The interesting twist here, though, is that Spotify no longer has exclusivity. The rights to the show can be used by other platforms if Joe chooses. And so that would mean that you might see him popping up on YouTube, Apple, and I would expect other places. The fact that it is not exclusive is what I think is the interesting piece. We're going to start with commentary. Michelle, as the content marketing queen, I think we'd love to start with your thoughts on the matter.
I'm just putting the article into the Bloc chat. I think the interesting thing about it is that they knew that they wouldn't be able to hold him if they didn't let him distribute elsewhere. And I think it's no coincidence that this is an election year in the US, and Joe would have said, I can amass many, many followers, many deals, many whatevers if I'm not exclusively with you. So I'm going to go unless you let me do that. And I think that that's why they've done it.
Do you think they had a choice?
No, I don't think so. Well, would you want to lose him? I mean, you know, they're pretty tight about saying what numbers were and stuff like that. One of the interesting things is they no longer have people that are exclusive to them. So those deals and those, 2020, 2021, when they signed a lot of people who could only be on Spotify. So Joe Rogan, Brené Brown, there was a number of people that did deals with Spotify, including Harry and Meghan, for example. And all of that stuff, none of that has, I think, eventuated with what it is that they thought they would get, whether it would be more subscribers or more advertising dollars, etc. Clearly that hasn't worked because now they don't have anyone that has an exclusive deal on their platform anymore.
Interesting. Mike, what do you think? Is Spotify overpaying for this? Was Joe lucky? Is this the new future we're going to be looking towards? What do you think?
Well, everything we talked about was a little bit of a war going on between these various platforms to try to get some of these shows. Now, Harry and Meghan, whatever the hell you may think of them, they don't hold a candle to what Joe Rogan brings as far as an audience goes.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Who's Harry and Meghan?
Whoever they are.
But I'm kidding.
The point on this, I think, and I don't know the intricate workings of the deal, but I would assume that Spotify still holds certain exclusivity when it comes to maybe first release of the show. Joe does not do live shows, but this opens a ridiculous opportunity for him as a brand to monetize in so many different ways here. Right now, he can go back onto YouTube where he was previously, rekindle all of that monetization and that content and really capitalize on some of the ad spend and the revenue share there. And then I would assume that, overall you're looking at a wider reach being accessible on all these various platforms. What's interesting though is, from a sponsorship perspective, putting the business hat on for a second, do you have to factor in the audience that's listening on a particular platform? Because, Joe doesn't do live reads on his show. whatever platform he's on, they'll cut and they'll do a pre-scripted read that he's done in the past. That's at least the way Spotify has done it. Now, if you're sponsoring on Apple, for example, are you competing with a potential advertiser that's going on Spotify or on YouTube? These are also another variable that as an advertiser, you got to throw into the mix here because, I have multiple platforms where I could watch his content, but which one is going to target me the most as far as ad placement?
Interesting.
So maybe what Joe does is, as you said, maybe it's released, say, on Monday on Spotify and then Tuesday and Wednesday on, Apple Podcasts or wherever, YouTube. But since he records them, maybe he puts different ads within the sponsored for different platforms. So the people who would never go to Spotify but advertise on, Apple Podcasts or YouTube, he puts their ads into the breaks that he does with his thing. So he could potentially triple. Well, maybe he might. Maybe the before stuff or the after stuff. Like, you don't know what. I mean, in this election year, I can't imagine that he's not going to do something a little bit different.
He's never done it, and I don't see him changing his format. Now, what they do is they do these pre-scripted reads on whatever platform. Right. They'll just cut the content wherever it is, mid-sentence, mid-word, it doesn't matter, and then they'll run the ad. That's Spotify's done that. YouTube has done that in the past. So, he does not want to interrupt the flow of whatever he's discussing by reading an ad. Now, again, all this is subjected to change. But my question, I guess, for Spotify and, the other component of this story is that their revenue went up in the fourth quarter. Well, I guess putting the logic hat on, if you fire your workforce and you have revenue coming in, the conclusion is that you're going to make more money because you have less overhead expenditures. But, did they overpay? In my opinion, absolutely. I mean, it wasn't too long ago they offered him $100 million deal. Now he's got to set the bar high because he is the biggest one out there. That part I understand. But what does Spotify really gain from this deal as opposed to last time when they did have exclusivity?
So that's what I was going to dig into, Mike. I love that you go in there. Number one, Joe is in the catbird seat. He's driving, right? He's the guy with the popularity. Spotify is in trouble at the moment. And I know this is flies in the face of what you're going to read in the financial press. Wall Street Journal, they love what Spotify is doing. They've laid off a bunch of workers. The company's closer to profitability. What means is the company's losing money. Spotify right now loses about $75 million a year. And so by re-signing Joe at that huge multiple, if it is $250 million, that's rumored, but that's probably accurate. You're talking about a very big bet on this guy that they don't have a choice. They can't just let him go. He's their jam right now. So I think Spotify has bought themselves a window of time to figure out how they can to make money in another way. They've started it back in the day as a music download. You guys remember when they were working with the record labels? That wasn't profitable. They went into podcasting. That seemed profitable till they paid all the money to Joe. And now they're paying over double that. So they need to figure out their business model is what I'm getting at. I think that for Joe, this is a win. And ultimately, I do agree he shows up on Apple, YouTube. It might not be stuttered. It might not be that, comes out on Monday on Spotify and Tuesday on YouTube. He can do what he wants right now. I'd equate him to Mr. Beast. When you take these big guys and you put them onto a larger platform, but they've got millions in the audience, you're just you got a tiger by the tail if you're one of these big old traditional platforms.
So what is Spotify paying for?
To not lose what they have.
But they've lost them anyway because he can easily post that same content on other platforms.
I'm talking. You're right. But let me clarify. They have lost the exclusivity with Joe. Yes, they haven't lost.
But they still have him.
The viewership that Joe was bringing them is what as long as they have that viewership, they've got another chance at life here to figure out what they're going to do. If they lose,
how long was the previous deal? Was it only 1 year, or was it 2 or 3. I can't remember.
I think it was a
It's not
5-year
in the
deal.
It was 5.
story.
It was 5 years.
Because if you would think now, right, if you think about people's habits, okay, so that's a long enough period of time to train people who like Joe Rogan that listen to him every week to go automatically to Spotify to find him.
I don't
That's
disagree.
what they're
In fact,
paying for. I think that's what they're paying for.
I'm an exact example of that, right? When he moved over exclusively to Spotify, that's when I dumped whatever other podcast platforms I had just to consolidate all of my stuff in there because, you know, I'm a fan of his show. So that point is proven. But how much money have I given Spotify over those 5 years? 0. I haven't paid them a dime for anything. So
you don't pay for premium.
No, I don't. So again, what is the ratio of people who have come over that have subscribed to premium for what? They don't really get any other exclusive content.
This ties to our previous conversations. For those who aren't aware or follow the show regularly, last week we discussed the streaming wars and how Mr. Beast is moving over to Amazon and the WWE is moving over to Netflix. This is the same concept where these platforms need to figure out how they're going to make money. Mr. Beast has other businesses. Joe Rogan is going to have other businesses very clearly. Mike, you're right. That's really what this is about. This is a business battle, and Joe happens to be the guy in the seat at the moment. Joe will win no matter what. I would keep an eye on how these companies are going to make money.
Well, I mean, he is holding all the cards. There's no doubt about it. And look, to Spotify's defense in the way that they've constructed and managed him over the last 5 years, they really let him do his thing. You know, I mean, there was a period where, you know, he was interviewing people about COVID and, you know, all of the vaccines and everything like that.
And like, and all that bit.
Yeah. I mean, everybody, even some of the employees were like threatening to boycott some of his content and everything. And, you know, he's expressed repeatedly that the ownership and the management have called him directly and said, look, you know, regardless on whatever the noise is, we're going to continue to let you do your thing. And I think that more so than the money, more so than anything, that's critical to him. At least being able to be on the same wavelength and, you know, construct the content that he wants, because that's obviously the content that his listeners want to hear. But he does hold all the cards, right? So, you know, I think, I guess the better question on this, and just to kind of spin the same topic in a different way, is losing the comments, is the negative press behind Joe Rogan not being a part of Spotify worth $250 million to them?
I mean, time will bear that out, but I feel like the lesson for the creator economy here is, and anyone that's broadcast live, is that your audience is your future.
Yes.
All right. Final thoughts on this?
Your first party data. My final thought would be, if you were Mr. Beast, you'd be a little bit pissed right now at going to Apple for $100 million.
Again, he's no Joe Rogan.
All right. So story number 2, which ties into this, is coming off of Variety. YouTube TV powers up to more than 8 million subscribers. So YouTube TV has piloted it's a new version of YouTube, basically. It's an internet pay TV service that now has 8 million subs. This is according to YouTube's data. So that means YouTube TV, which is available only in the US, will be charging $72.99 a month. And that makes it the biggest internet streaming subscription TV in America. So this is tying directly to what we talked about. This competes with Disney Plus, Hulu, which I guess is Disney, Netflix. The streaming wars are fun for the viewers, but these companies are not making money yet. And so YouTube believes they have a new angle on this. We'll start off with you, Mike, because this is, I know you've been leading opinion last few weeks on this. Is this a good move for YouTube? Or are they making a mistake?
Is this a good move for YouTube? Do the math, man. $72.99 a month times 12 months times 8 million. It's $7 trillion a year that they're bringing in.
Will people pay it?
Wow.
Well, they already say they have 8 million subscribers. So, you know, that math alone allows it to be a profitable space. The thing I can't wrap my head around is, you know, after all these years of growing up, before all these streaming platforms and before the internet even, like cable and TV and all of these things basically ran the world, right? There was so much money being funneled into that. This is a massive threat to that industry. Like that industry is basically dead. What the hell does cable companies offer now? Internet services. That's it. I mean, they're literally throwing in cable packages with their internet subscriptions just because nobody wants cable anymore. They just want internet in order to stream.
That's been the case for years.
It's more so now, though. I mean, it's to the point where, again, the NFL has to resort to signing an exclusive deal with one of these streaming platforms linked to a cable company in order to air one of their playoff games.
All right. Michelle, what do you think on this? Do you think that this is this going to work? 8 million, just for comparison, by the way, Comcast has 14 million as subscribers, and they're losing money.
Worldwide. Yeah.
Right.
So I Mike's point about cable companies and local free-to-air stations and things like that was my thought too after I read it. How long can these other companies be sustained? Like I don't think within 5 years there's probably going to be one or two of them left, not many others. It's an interesting model and an interesting thought behind the fact that what they are doing is keeping people on YouTube all the time. So if you have a habit where at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, while you're making dinner or eating dinner, you watch the news, my guess is now you're doing it on YouTube. So you move from, watching a video before or a new segment of a program or watching Joe Rogan's video on YouTube, and you go, oh, it's 6 o'clock, the news is on, you click over to YouTube TV. You're not turning off YouTube and going to your television set and putting on the local news or whatever, because my understanding is that you can get almost all the local news services on this YouTube TV as well. So what that will do in a year or two or a couple of years' time will be, like we talked about with going to Spotify, if you were a Rogan fan for the past few years, is you will just not do that anymore. You will not be watching local stuff or even Friends or, reruns of Seinfeld, etc., etc. You won't be doing any of that anywhere else but on a streaming service. And in this case, 8 million people are doing it on YouTube every day. So
interesting.
Well, this is why Blockbuster doesn't exist anymore, right? It's just everything is accessible at your fingertips at any given moment. You have a conversation with somebody and all of a sudden you talk about Breaking Bad and you're like, oh man, I haven't seen that show in a while, and you're going to watch it with somebody who's never seen it before. Like, you have all that at your disposal now. The challenge, I think, with a lot of these streaming platforms is the same issue we've always had. If you want to watch a movie and you have a subscription to Netflix and you go to search for that, and then you find out that it's only exclusive on Hulu, then, you're left with the option of, do I pay for Hulu to watch my movie and satisfy my craving? Or do I just sit back and say, oh, well, it's not on the streaming service that I already pay for? So, all of this was designed originally in their marketing pitch to reduce your overhead on, your entertainment at home, right? Why pay a cable company $150 a month when you can pay Netflix $14? But then $14 for Netflix, $8 for Hulu, $74 for YouTube. Now we're all of a sudden way above whatever the cable provider was charging us anyway.
So two things. I'll go ahead.
Can I just add one thing before you say? So if you think about it, recently I want to watch a TV series that in the UK here at the moment is not available on anything that we have. So we have Netflix and Amazon Prime and Disney, and it's not available. I have to get Paramount Plus. Now, I had a look at, if I went to Amazon and I purchased the 2 seasons of The Gilded Age, which is what I wanted to watch, it's going to cost me something like $40, $39.99. But I can get a Paramount Plus subscription here in the UK for $9.99 a month, and I can watch all of them. Now, in theory, I could watch them all, cancel it at the end of that month because, 2 seasons of 10 shows a season doesn't take much to watch. And it's only cost me $10 as opposed to $40. Now, if I wanted to keep them forever, I guess, as long as I've got my Amazon Prime subscription, I keep them. I don't know what happens if I cancel my Amazon Prime subscription when I purchase them. But when I thought about that, it's insane. I can have 6 months of a streaming services that gives me hundreds of other programs to watch that I might want to look at, as opposed to buying one thing for a particular price. This is the reason why people don't buy DVDs anymore, or people don't buy CDs anymore because of Spotify and those sorts of things, because the convenience is just not there, and the price differentials now are getting crazy. Although that said, I think the YouTube price is very expensive. But anyway, if you had no other cable, I suppose it would be okay.
I have a couple of thoughts on this. This is where we're all witnessing in real time the internet platform video providers become the new television stations, right? And going back to the old 50s, 60s model of television, traditional analog TV, it was always about what show you had, right? In the 70s, it was MASH. In the 80s, it was Cheers. In the 90s, it was Seinfeld. It was Friends in the 2000s. You need some anchor hook, which is where these streaming wars are heading. Joe Rogan, Mr. Beast, the stars, if you will, of the new television stations are the internet stars. And so if you're a creator, you need the audience. If you're a platform, if you're a Bolt Plus, for example, you should be thinking about live, because live is the one thing that people will pay up for real time. To your point, Mike, earlier, Spotify Joe Rogan, he doesn't do it live. So I'll catch Rogan whenever I want. You haven't paid Spotify anything because you don't need to. But you will pay for the NFL's, Super Bowl.
Yeah. Or I'll find a different platform that'll stream it for me.
Right. So I think we're just seeing a recreation of the 1960s television all over again, using the internet players, and instead of a traditional TV series, but that's going to lead to new TV stars, if you will. That's the creator economy. So we're going to see a wholesale reinvention with regular people of the old Hollywood model.
I think the other thing too is that if you have a look at something like a Netflix, like every day they've got new shows, like every single day, like the number of shows a week that come out on that. Now, whether or not you like them or not, based on the algorithm, they recommend them to you. So you don't necessarily see all of the ones that came out today or this week. But surely that model of creation, and we know how much they've paid in the past to create content, and how we've talked about at $9 or $10 or $15 a month by the number of subscribers, they can't actually sustain the amount of money they spend on content creation. But they feel like they're kind of in a bit of they're a mouse on the wheel, aren't they? Of, well, everyone expects us to bring out 10 new shows a week. So if we don't keep bringing out 10 new shows a week, people will go to Paramount, or they'll go to Hulu, or they'll go to wherever. But it then puts pressure on those people. Like, how long's it been since Disney brought out something new? Like, until there's, a new Mandalorian series or a new movie come out, unless they buy other back catalogs, they're not really adding anything new to their stuff like the Netflix of this world are.
Mike made this point last week, though, and I agree with you, Michelle, that there's, first of all, nothing new under the sun, right? Mike, you were talking about how they recycle, but also the fact that these companies are under the gun to produce continual hits. When Mr. Beast takes 3 months to put out a video and now he needs one weekly, it's not going to be of the same quality. That's why we're waiting still for Mandalorian 4. It's taking forever, but that's the standard. For those who follow Disney, Bad Batch is a great show, animated, taking forever, not 9 months. Like this, these are long gaps. In the old years of television, there was the off season of TV. You guys remember this, the repeat season?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So we're going to go into that with the internet. You're going to see the same thing because they need that creativity time. And that's the reality of what people expect. I want to watch Hollywood movie level Avengers special effects on my regular YouTube because that's what I'm used to.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it also adds the component that you mentioned about the live content, right? Like the sports and, any live, reality shows or whatever. But, Disney does own ESPN, and ESPN has a streaming platform, ESPN Plus, like everything is a plus. And they've done very well with it. They've signed, sort of not semi-exclusive deals with the NHL. They've done some work with baseball. They obviously have some football with Monday Night. So, they've done some damage on the premium side. and the streaming side and can somehow link that. But, again, that is content that writes itself, that doesn't require 3 months to script or to create, right? That's just, it's generated. And guess what? They could store it and you can watch it again at any time you want to.
Right. I also think
I
it's
mean,
going to lead to, go ahead, Michelle.
sorry, go on. No,
that was the pairing up of teams for faster content creation. Go ahead, Michelle.
I was just going to address some. We've got quite a few people in the Bolt chat talking about things and chatting about the experience and whether or not there's a consolidation coming, as we just talked about then. And Spanners, just mention here that the old TV stations are what's coming to these streaming platforms now. So like Bolt, like YouTube TV, that those sorts of, it could be signaling the changing of the guard, I guess, if you think about that, where, your local, like in Australia, we have Channel 7, 9 and 10 and the public television station. There's kind of 4 main, 5 with SBS, which used to show all the foreign movies. Now they do all sorts of things. But, I just can't see how they're going to survive if they don't compete like this. But then they can't, because they don't spend money on local content anymore. I think that the way in which these companies will now have to, continue to create content, which I talked about before, I think it's going to be a big stress for them. I mean, look what happened with COVID, followed by the actors and the writers' strike. There's been this, like some shows that we watched the last time we watched them at the end, like For All Mankind or, Morning Wars on Apple TV, like it was 18 months to almost 2 years at the end of the season that kind of finished at the beginning of COVID, until we got a new season for each of those. That's a long time. I don't think I turned on my Apple box to watch anything on Apple TV because there was nothing new on that I hadn't already seen that I wanted to see, which is this content hamster wheel, isn't there, about trying to create stuff to keep people turning on, because if they're not buying things, they're not looking at ads, they're not signing up to podcast episodes, all of that stuff.
So I want to tie this.
Hang on. I think that like we're giving too much credit to new content that's out there. And, Jake the Snake here in the Bolt chat, he brings up a point that I was about to touch on. So the timing is perfect for this. There is so much content out there, and we've trained ourselves to repurpose that content as a way to sort of relive experiences that we've had in the past. This is something that, again, these streaming platforms have a unique advantage of compared to, cable or compared to, the old blockbusters of yore. But like when my kids get older, like why wouldn't I be able to find the whole Transformer series and watch it and relive that whole magical moment in my childhood again with them? Now, all of this is content that doesn't need to get redone, or we need to wait on writers and do all these other things. I think that's an extra component of it. But once again, once those pieces are out, how many people are actually waiting week to week to follow a series on something like Netflix versus waiting for the entire series to be out there and then binging it one weekend later on in the summer?
Hence the hook of live, though.
Exactly. But
that's why now they're doing 4 episodes this month, and in 6 weeks' time they give you the last 4 episodes, so that you've actually got to keep your subscription for at least 2 months.
Yes, that's what they did that. Well, I don't know if they did it directly, but with Yellowstone, Paramount did that with Yellowstone,
Crown and all of that sort of stuff.
So I want to make 2 points. Number one, nostalgia. This is an actual marketing angle. Right, nostalgia sells. There's a reason we keep watching the same reboots of how many versions of the different, they're doing Dune again coming out. So Cobra Kai, it's 5 seasons in. 5 seasons. These are like, why? Because people like the old stuff. So they just, that's not going to go away, Mike, and you may not like it, but that is a business strategy. Number 2 is AI is the overlooked factor that no one's talking about, including us right now. AI is going to make it very easy to create content, already has. So the creation end of it has been solved. The creativity end of what hooks the people ties back to my first point, nostalgia. So how can we put a new twist on the old thing? So Mike, if you're a Transformers fan, the new version of Transformers is that the that Optimus Prime was an oppressor and that Megatron was leading the rebellion against the overlords. And there's like, now they're freedom fighters. The bad guys are the good guys, which is
I get it. But like this is a stain on what I grew up loving about that show, right? So
but they're
am
not
I going
going
to
at-
watch the new, am I going to watch the new revamped, woke version of Transformers, or am I going to go back and
No, it's not a woke
keep
thing.
everything, regardless, the newer version of it? Like, am I more like, look at all the Disney crap that's come out that's just remakes of everything that they've already done and all the classics that exist currently.
However,
did Little Mermaid do anything? No.
Last week, my husband said to me, "Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Smith's been made into a series," and he's like, "But Brad and Angelina running it, are they?"
Yes and no. It depends on how they present it, Mike, because I grew up reading the old Iron Man comic books when I was a kid. And in those comics, for those who are fans, Jarvis is an old man butler at the Tony's house.
Oh, yes.
And in the new movies, he's the suit. So that's however, I loved it. So my point is it depends how you do it.
It totally does. And look, there will be people who continuously absorb that new content. It doesn't mean that it is, ultimately better than the previous one, or if it's going to, have the same emotional impact as it did for, I remember as a kid, Saturday morning, sitting down religiously, watching a whole series of cartoons. If those cartoons come in a bundle on these streaming platforms and I can experience that same thing with my kids, I'm all in. But if I have to sit there and wait for some new thing that's coming out with all these new bells, and it takes away from that overall experience to me.
So this touches on interruptive marketing. Go ahead, Michelle.
So the only thing about that is licensing of content. So the older stuff. Now, for example, I am a Downton Abbey fan, absolutely love it, watched it 20 plus times, the whole series. And I'm in Facebook groups of other Downton Abbey fans, and it's really interesting to hear what people say. Now, recently, US Netflix lost or didn't renew the license for Downton Abbey on Netflix. Like, absolute outrage, tens of thousands of people screaming for the fact that they can no longer, using their Netflix subscription, watch Downton Abbey. And they're scrambling to try and find which service it's going to be on now. So for the nostalgia stuff, if they don't keep renewing the content license, then people will jump around to services. There's not much loyalty, and that's one of the things that's the biggest problem in this space.
That is why Joe Rogan gets $250 million and Spotify doesn't want to pay.
Yeah.
Now, those who may remember Netflix back in the day when they were trying to get going, right when they were starting to become the internet darling, they were picking up old canceled television shows and rebooting them. Do you guys remember this?
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen with Downton Abbey. Right.
But for $15, you can watch all of that, right? Like, Amazon did it too with Prime, but now they've started shifting gears to, instead of, you paying for Prime and having video included, we're going to make, 60% of the content available, and the rest you got to either rent, pay, or, buy the series, buy the box, whatever it is. But there's a monetization component to that too. And, frankly, look, I mean, I'm only speaking from my own experience, but I can't imagine that I'm unique here. If I'm searching around Amazon Prime and I see a video that I want to watch and there's a $4 rental fee to it, if I really want to watch it, I won't think twice about it. But, that same video might be available on Netflix, or it might be available on some of the other platforms that I'm already engaged with. So, I'd much rather look on those platforms that I'm already paying for as well in order to absorb that content, instead of just saying, hey, take more of my money.
Right.
The worst thing about the Prime thing is that when you've watched it previously and you didn't pay because it was included, and then you go, oh, yeah, I might watch that movie again, and now they want $4.99, and then you go, aren't I already paying? So that's how you piss off people.
I want to take the podcast back to our roots here with a little bit of conversation around what's going on in the blockchain world. So I'm going to take us over to, if that's okay with you guys, story number 3, which is coming off of all places, CNBC. Crypto on a clear path towards mass adoption. This is, for those who don't know, the Business on the Block is around the whole purpose of this podcast is to dig into how blockchain is changing the entertainment space, oftentimes connected to the creator economy, sometimes to the traditional media, which we just went through. But all of this ties into crypto, obviously. The reason this story makes the cut here is because Chuck Mounts, the chief DeFi officer at S&P Global Ratings, which is another conversation, discuss the agency's rankings of stablecoins and their outlook for digital assets. This is interesting to this show for two reasons. Number one, S&P Global Ratings now has a chief decentralized finance officer. We'll discuss that in a moment. And secondly, in the same vein, CNBC Crypto World, which is where we found this story, is a division of CNBC now that is the latest news and trading updates from the digital currency markets. Mike, we're going to start with you on this one because you have a lot of projects going on the blockchain at the moment. What do you think about the fact that crypto is on a clear pathway towards mass adoption per CNBC?
Well, I mean, I think it's something that we've been shouting from the rooftops. It's all a matter of accessibility. You know, the fact that a news organization picks this up, whether they're credible or not, is irrelevant. The fact that they're discussing it and they actually have some sort of a chief executive officer in that, you know, whose sole job is that division, you know, that's got to tell you that there's still news in the cycle that's worthwhile. You know, we've expressed on several different episodes / seasons here on the value that crypto brings as an alternative to, you know, the commerce and the marketplace and, you know, capitalism and all these other various components of trading goods and services in exchange for something. But I think there's another component of this that maybe CNBC is starting to realize, and you know, that's the immutability and the transparency that goes within these transactions. You know, the stable coins and all these things that they're discussing. I mean, this is the safety net in their hedge fund conversation, right? Like these are the low risk type of deals that they can discuss pretty openly, get people kind of accustomed to the language and start really just, you know, dripping those things out there. But again, once people jump into the pool and they realize on how big and how much potential this, I don't want to call it a currency alternative, but it sort of is on a global stage, you know, then people can start understanding that, you know, I can put this to use in whatever business ventures or whatever, you know, daily activities I have going on my end.
Michelle, what do you think about this? This is I got a lot of thoughts, but I want to hear yours first.
A couple of things. I think that it is the big end of town, so the Wall Street end of town going, right, let's see how and where and what we can do with this space because we need to be more active in it. And so that's why S&P have a global chief DeFi officer. I'd really love to correct it to say crypto bro officer, but anyway, I won't do that. And when you look at Chuck Mounts, you know that has to be in his 60s. I don't know. Maybe I'm doing him a disservice, but he's certainly not a young person in this space like we know that there's lots of. So he's obviously an established name in the industry, been around for a long time doing other stuff, and he's dipping his toe in this, which is, as you say, great for the fact that it means it is going to start to become more mainstream and more adopted, except that, as we've talked about probably 1,000 gazillion billion times on this show, that Wall Street will find a way to get their leg in. And this is just one of those ways in which they're going to do that.
So for those who aren't aware of Chuck Mounts, I'm sure that he's a very accomplished gentleman here. And as a fellow former Wall Streeter for many decades, I mean this respectfully, but a quick overview of the guy. He's the S&P Global head of decentralized finance right now, but he comes from the Federal Reserve. Previous to that, he was at UBS as the head of research. He has a degree in public policy from Harvard. The guy's been around Wall Street for a very long time, and he's as Wall Street as they come. And this is who is currently the chief decentralized finance officer. And the whole concept of DeFi is elimination of traditional finance. You don't need banks. And so that's, to your point, Michelle, my whole rant here is you're looking at Wall Street taking over the DeFi name. DeFi does not mean fi. Decentralized finance is the opposite of finance. And so your regular people that are in finance are running the DeFi world. This includes former regulators, former research analysts. So I really feel like this is a fascinating turn where people are not aware of people think this is great. DeFi is getting its exposure. It's the clear pathway towards mass adoption. But really what it is the clear control under the thumb of Wall Street. Now, alongside that is CNBC, who for years didn't follow crypto. Jamie Dimon famously called it garbage. Warren Buffett, like all the established names in traditional finance, pooped on crypto. At this point, suddenly there's a news division devoted to it from the number one centralized news agency that follows traditional finance. I find this whole thing laughable. Crypto doesn't need decentralized finance officers telling them there's a clear path. It's been running on its own since 2009. So my issue...
See, that's where I disagree with you, man, because like, again, not everybody's in the trenches like we are. Not everybody understands this. They hear all of the FTX stories and, you know, they have that sour taste in their mouth and their black eyes that they just point to and reference as a reason to not be in it. But, you know, they for whatever reason, rely on a source like this to basically say, okay, here's the green light. We're good to go. This term is now okay. My question, I guess, more specifically for you with your experience on Wall Street, you know, with this global chief DeFi, like, is all of this relative to on-chain activities, or is this really starting to segue into some of the concepts that we saw with Bitcoin now being acceptable by the SEC and trading the futures on, you know, everything that's off-chain as far as activity goes? Are they just leveraging buzzwords in order to say, hey, we're hip and we're cool?
Yes, this has nothing to do with the blockchain. There's a
step towards control.
There's a traditional centralized company that has a role called DeFi officer, but it is not. This is not about S&P has things on the blockchain that you can get involved with. This is simply a glorified research analyst position, in my opinion, that's discussing this evolution of a thing they'd really like to get under their thumb.
So with the money that's behind it, and obviously with the importance enough to have a chief executive officer at this type of entity, you know, how soon are we going to see more security being brought into the overall crypto world?
Right.
Like insurance companies that are backing stable coins. And like, are we going to start seeing more of these type of entities, you know, sort of as a third party service provider to those particular, you know, crypto or on-chain services now?
So to your point, Mike, there was an article that you had flagged on ripple.com, new frameworks for regulating decentralized finance. So that basically means the thing that's been running without regulation just fine, all of a sudden there's now going to be regulation built around it. And that's the whole idea, was that it wasn't under the banking system's control. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I feel like we're watching the transformation of DeFi into Fi, and that flies in the face of the ethos of what decentralized finance was built on.
But don't you feel it's working backwards? Right?
So?
Like, well, I mean, the whole DeFi concept came out and it proved the model that we don't need them in order to make this work. So now they're going to hitch their wagon to it. But the reality is that people already realize that they don't need them in order to make this work. So, you know, they're going to flash their name in front of things to get people like friends of mine who aren't in crypto and waiting for a moment like this, or BlackRock, to basically give their thumb up of approval in order to jump in this. But at the end of the day, there's still hundreds of millions of people that use this without the intermediary right now. Are they just going to randomly shift into that manner because these guys now decided that they want to play in the sandbox?
Yes. So for those who aren't following the news either, yesterday, Robinhood had a deal they signed with MetaMask. Robinhood is a very traditional broker dealer, and they're online, but they basically are a TradFi. And you've got MetaMask, which obviously is a crypto wallet. So this whole concept of TradFi and DeFi bleeding together, including in the term chief decentralized finance officer, whatever this guy is, this is the new reality of the blockchain money world is becoming just the regular old money world.
Well, Robinhood's a great example because how, you know, again, former Wall Street, I'd love your opinion on this. Like, how much of a joke was Robinhood to Wall Street?
Well, that was the whole Wall Street bets thing, right? They didn't like that at all. Robinhood, as it became popular at the time, was a threat to specifically the hedge fund community, because it allowed shorting of things en masse using size of audience versus amount of money. Right?
Well, it also was a threat to traditional financial advisors. Right. Because, you know, people who traditionally would be the ones to, you know, set up a stock portfolio or anything like that for you. Like, now you have the means to do it yourself. So again, that's more of the the backdoor DeFi approach to stock trading and to getting involved in any Wall Street activities. Now, I mean, would you argue that it's more mainstream, or are they trying to stay in their lane, and that's why the deal with MetaMask sort of came about?
This is the theme that's going to run through finance for the next 5 years is that there's money to be made with crypto anything. If it's got the name DeFi or blockchain attached to it, there's money. And so there are going to be all types of tie-ups, deals, licensing, ETFs being issued. You're going to see futures that already exist now, by the way, on other cryptos like Ethereum. All of this is going to be Wall Street's way to get involved with what's gone. The train left the station without them, and they're trying to get their money.
They're running along behind.
That's a great analogy, but is the world smart enough to realize now that they are the drain that created this technology in the first place? Or will they just say this is easier and we'll just jump on and do it like we've traditionally done it?
I don't have my tinfoil hat handy.
I have mine.
But you could argue this is the same thing with the school system creating workers rather than entrepreneurs. All right. Is that a tinfoil crown?
Something like that. No, this is real though.
Mike, I like your glasses. It works with the hat. This is perfect. So here's the point. I think that you're going to just see more and more of this. Is it really DeFi? Is it really blockchain? No, but that's okay. To your point, Mike, maybe it popularizes the concept. I just think that by the time enough people come on board and are doing it, it's going to already be, you have to go through a traditional exchange and a regular broker, and the government approves. You have to report all that stuff. That doesn't exist right now. That's where it's headed. I know it's not what people want to hear, but that is what's happening if nothing changes.
I think that's what's being attempted. I don't know if it'll be widely accepted. And again, you can hire all the chief whatever officers you want to. It doesn't mean that there's a valid reason why we need you when we've proven we don't yet. Fair
enough. Final story to wrap this up. I want to find out what's going on over the pond. There's a story here out of, it's from the Ada Lovelace Institute, regulating AI in the UK. The UK government has outlined an AI regulation strategy. They want global leadership of AI development. They've put £100 million that they're investing into innovation and safety measures. The concept is the UK wants to create a thought leadership in the AI space. They want to avoid heavy-handed legislation, and they are saying they want to become a flexible, fast-evolving regulator on a sector-specific level. And what that means is instead of making rules for everything AI rules will be specific to industry. So, Michelle, you live in the UK. In fact, they probably take a lot of their political guidance from your thoughts.
Yeah, no.
You're going to lead our conversation here. So. What do you think about this? Is this interesting? Is it real, or is this just grasping at straws?
So I noticed that this is actually dated July, so last year, but it's just starting to sort of be debated in the public realm, I guess you could say. We talked a lot last year, didn't we, about the UK trying to become a blockchain, crypto, Web3 hub, competing with Abu Dhabi and Singapore and a lot of other places. One of the most hilarious lines in this particular report article is that the UK government has laid out its ambition to make the UK an AI superpower. The train for them being a superpower in anything left a couple of decades, maybe even a century or so ago. So I don't think that that's going to happen. Obviously, we have talked a lot, haven't we, about there needs to be rules and regulation, not just about AI, but about Web3 and crypto stuff as well. And most countries are moving pretty slowly on that. The EU has some regulation around AI images and using people's likenesses and those sorts of things now. It's kind of a little bit of a catch-up in that regard, which is usual for the UK. But it's just another iteration of what we've been talking about in terms of the Web3 stuff for, 18 months or so now.
Mike, what do you think about this whole AI UK news?
Well, before, when we talked in the previous story and I talked about security and insurance and all these different types of industries being popped up, I mean, that was literally the alley-oop to you to segue into the story. You missed the jump, by the way, but
Well, the first time.
nonetheless, I think that there's definitely a need for this, and we talked about this, the Taylor Swift story a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was last week. I don't even know anymore.
Last week. Yeah.
There's a requirement to get certain things. It can't just be free reign to everybody, because not everybody has the correct intentions with this. This is a business show. We try to segue whatever topics we're discussing into the business application, and obviously finding these different tools that, make your assessment of whatever marketing ventures or business development ventures you're involved in, using these tools to those advantages. However, I still pose the question, if this open source toothpaste, as you put it, Mark, is already out of the tube, how do you go back and regulate things? Is it regulated on the user experience, or is it regulated on the hardware experience? And if so, how soon can we start training specific AI? Because that's really the premise of it. How can we train it to, I guess, bypass those safety rails and provide the content that we want to create regardless? And if we can't do that, what is actually intelligent about it? It is nothing more than something I've been sort of describing on this technology from the beginning here. It is a glorified computer program that we just give a fancy name to. So again, I don't know where all of these, security implications come in. Maybe it's something to do with on-chain activity as well. And whatever content is pumped out, in super fast format has to run through some sort of a protocol on-chain that allows for a filter. Maybe that's a solution. But again, all of this is really dependent on where things evolve from the open sourced piece versus the user.
Longtime listeners of the show will remember that we often talk about blockchain being the way to regulate and govern AI, right? That's the only way you can really track something that's anyone can make anything, is essentially AI. I don't believe AI is regulatable in the degree that they want it to be. Like, it's not like a traditional technology that you could just pass a law. And so you're in a situation now where, what does AI regulation actually end up looking like? It's not going to be anything like what people want. The three big areas of AI development, which is where people are applying it the most: entertainment, which is the purpose of this show, gaming, and making money, which oftentimes leads into the deep fakes, explicit porn thing, unfortunately. Taylor Swift, as we talked about last week, is the perfect example. When the fan base wants action against what's happening out to her, you're going to see the regulators respond, because there's an uproar right now. And so I think in that regard, it's good. But ultimately, longer term, regulating AI, whether it's in the UK or elsewhere, is always going to be a challenge. It's not something you could just put the toothpaste back in the tube like we talk about.
It can't, because again, with the development of the technology creates other technology, and not everybody that's intelligent enough to work around AI is involved in AI, right? So people can build alternative measures that can get around the safety rails and utilize AI to provide whatever content they need. We called them prompt engineers at one point, right? For a span of 6 seconds. They were able to manipulate the algorithm of the AI models and craft whatever content they were expecting from the output. Same concept. But again, where does the safety rails go in? Is it a money grab? Maybe. Again, this is why I keep bringing up the issue. Like, insurance companies, arguably one of the biggest scams in history. They have the opportunity here to create an industry, create their footprint in an industry that has zero protection or security. And whether they provide that or not is irrelevant. They've proven throughout the course of history that they don't really conduct themselves accordingly.
To that point, Mike, the business model of insurance companies isn't actually insurance, it's risk management. They would have to be able to insure themselves against.
But if they can control that, then they control the risk. Right. So again, that's
the role of regulation, isn't it? Of anything. Regulation of anything is control.
But if you can monetize that by actually charging based around the risk that you control, that's a wide open industry right now.
When you're talking companies, I agree with you. When you're talking some Chinese sweatshops making Nikes in the back alleyway with children, it's very hard to control AI.
But yet
anyone
Nike
can do
has
it.
Insurance.
Right. But I mean, if I'm making an AI anything, if I'm making AI Taylor Swift videos that I shouldn't be, who's regulating that? Like, I'm not going to go to the government and be like, hey, do I have permission to make the people are just doing stuff.
Okay, so I'm an insurance company. I'm designed to mitigate risk and implement security, right? I'm trying to control everything from start to finish. If I have the ability to filter out before the user has the ability to receive the output, what that content driven into the AI system, that open source system, versus when it comes out, they are sort of a filter in between there. Now you're charging people for the filtered content, but you're also on the other side having the ability to charge the open source concept where you're mitigating the risk. You're providing that security. You're making the user experience more enjoyable.
The only way you could quote unquote filter out, as you put it, Mike, is if you have full control and access to the platforms that are putting stuff out there.
And that's my point. So like a company like that would go to somebody like, and I'll use social media like as a weird example on this, right? Because, you know, all these third party, you know, content validators and all these pieces that came out since COVID, you know, they're a perfect example of that. You can't post something now without somebody basically giving it a check mark. Now, where does blockchain fit into this? Blockchain's entire model is built around validators. Right? They're designed to validate a transaction in order to cement it into the block and in the chain. If there's a validator, even if it's a computer program that's designed to analyze whatever that input is before it's accessible as part of the output, then that's mitigating the risk.
Right. So you're getting into bias now.
I'm not by all means advocating for this. Don't get me wrong. I don't want that filter in place, but I also feel like this is a solution that could help with this regulatory conversation.
So one of the things I think too is that over the next 6 to 12 months, if regulation in some form, and to start with, it's not going to be big, there won't be as much, they won't be able to foresee all of the circumstances under which they need regulation, but let's assume that there's some base type of regulation. There's going to be whole industries and companies come out who are able to implement the regulations on websites or on chain things, because there is, I mean, we saw last week with the Taylor Swift thing, Twitter had no idea how to stop what was happening, and in the end basically just stopped anything to do with searching for Taylor Swift. Now that is not a long-term solution for any platform, but they couldn't, after 1 million shares, they didn't know what to do, they couldn't stop it. They just went bang and basically deleted everything to do with her to catch all of the images that they didn't want shared. So there's going to be a business, there's going to be lots of businesses that come out of this that
Norton
are the ones
2.0.
that can implement the regulations. Sorry, Mike.
Norton 2.0. When, you know, the early days of the internet, when you used to click on something and you got caught in a tornado or like a pop-up, you know, vortex, Norton came about with a business solution that said, hey, we can prevent this. They were that security protocol. But guess what? It didn't always work, right? But people still paid for it. Microsoft signed deals with them because they're thinking about your safety.
Yeah.
So two things. One, I never heard the term tornado before. That's hilarious. Two is you're right. Microsoft didn't really care if you were getting out of the tornado or not. They cared that they looked like they were protecting you, and so they could claim the high ground. So that was a business move.
But I agree. $1 trillion in the process.
The real answer, and I hate to use this term, but that's the old kill switch for the internet that they were talking about and everyone's afraid of from years back. So I don't know, regulation and free speech, that's always a conversation. That's definitely a hot topic here in the United States. All right, that's all we got for you for this week. We are back next week. We do this live every week on Wednesdays. We traditionally did in the afternoons. We've moved this earlier. Actually, it is your afternoon, Michelle. We'll be at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time in the U.S. And so this is a regular program.
2:30 UTC.
Sorry, 2:30 UTC. Thank you very much. A little math. I was never the math guy. And so you're going to get insights weekly as to around the digital media revolution. That's what we're calling the evolution of entertainment in the world of blockchain. From the creator economy to AI, these technologies are coming together now to create business opportunities for regular people and small businesses. And a lot of folks simply don't know how to take advantage of this. They don't understand the implications of what blockchain allows for a small business to do. They don't understand how to integrate these types of things into their current business model. And so the focal point of this show is to bring a little bit of business conversation around the different ways that small businesses can integrate and use the creator economy tools, if you will, to try to add new revenue streams. All right. I want to thank everyone. Michelle, Mike, it's been a good one. That's it. We'll see you guys next week.
See you next week. Bye.